So let's start with our first speaker, Anthony Fu. Let's go to the stage, my friend. Hello, good morning. Is it morning for you, by the way?
Yeah, it's kind of afternoon.
Afternoon, there you go. So, welcome. Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Yeah, and it's kind of like my first time to do this.
There you go. Well, you're in a nice place with a lot of nice people and a great audience, so I'm sure it's going to be fine. And also, you're going to be speaking about composability with Vue 3. And so, yeah, that's pretty cool. And also, I checked your Twitter page and you said you went full time with open source. That is a hell of a jump, man. That was awesome.
Yeah. I really appreciate that the support from the community that make this possible.
Yeah, I cannot imagine how I would do that to jump to something like that and make it work. So, people, if you like Anthony's talk, feel free to go to his GitHub sponsors page and actually sponsor him so he can continue doing all this great work. So,
Thank you.
anything you want to add before we kick this off?
Yeah, I kind of think, I have already covered in the recording.
Sure.
And yeah.
I have some interesting questions for after. And so also in the audience, please feel free to just shoot your questions into the chat because after the talk, I'll go over the questions I have. But if you guys have better questions, we're going to grab those, of course. Feel free to be challenging because Q&As are fun like that. And we can see people shine in the moment. So sit back and relax for our first talk of the day. Here's Anthony Fu with Composable Vue 3.
Hey everyone, happy Vue Day! My sharing today is Composable Vue, some patterns and tips that might be able to help you write better composable logic in Vue. My name is Anthony Fu, and I'm Vue core team member and also a member of it. I have created several projects like Vuex and IT Ally. I really love open source and now I'm working full-time on it. You can find me on GitHub and Twitter with the links below. Before I start, I want to give a thanks to all my sponsors to support my work and make all this happen. If you enjoy my work as well, you can find the links to sponsor me below. Thank you. So let's talk about today's topic, Composable Vue. It's all started with me made this project called Vuex, which is a collection of Vue composable utilities. Initially, I was making this to share some code that I wrote with Vue Composition API to be used across apps. Till now, it grows much bigger with the community. We are now an organization on GitHub with 9 team members and 8 add-on package for different integrations, like motions and document head management. We also have more than 100 utilities in the core package that work for both Vue 2 and 3. I'm really appreciated for all the contributors in the awesome community. In today's talk, I will share with you what I have learned during developing Vuex and use it to make apps in Composition API. Let's have a quick look at the Composition API itself. By the way, please note today's talk will be a little bit advanced, which I would assume you already have a basic knowledge of what the Vue Composition API is. But don't worry if you don't. I believe you will get some basic image of the methodology, and you can find the slides and the transcripts on my slides after the talk. Well, let's start with Ref and reactive. I bet many of you have wondered the difference between them and which one should you choose. You can think refs as variables and the reactives as objects. When you do the assignment, one is assigning value, the other one is assigning properties. Well, the usage of them can really depend on what you're gonna use them. But if we really need to pick one from them, I'd say go with ref whenever you can. With Ref, you will need to use .value to assessing and assigning values, but this also gives you more explicit awareness when you are tracking and triggering the reactivity system. As you can see the example here, I actually got an error by accidentally assigning a value into a Ref. So here I can change the code to fix it. But on the other hand, with reactive, you cannot tell the difference between a plain object and a reactive object without looking into the context, which could sometimes make the debugging a little bit harder. Also note, in reactive objects, there are several caveats you need to take care about. Like you can do destructure without two refs, otherwise they will lose the reactivity. And you will also need to wrap with a function when using with watch and so on, where ref does not have such limitations. When using with refs, a big obstacle that people facing is the annoying dot value. But actually, in many cases, you can omit it and make your code looks cleaner. The watch function accepts a ref as a watch source directly and will return the unwrapped new value of the ref in the callback. So in these cases, there is no dot value needed. The other one is the nature of Vue. In templates, all the refs are auto-unwrapped, even assignments. And whenever you feel like to better work with objects, you can pass a ref into a reactive object. And when you access the properties, reactive will unwrap the refs automatically for you. Change to the original ref will also reflect to the reactive object. Unref is another composition API I would like to introduce. As the name unref sounds, it's kind of the opposite of ref. While the ref function takes the value and turns it into a ref, unref takes a ref and returns its value. The interesting part of it is that if you pass a plain value to unref and it will return the value as is to you, you can see the implementation is basically this. This is not a big feature, but a good tip to unify your logic, which I will show you soon. So that's a tip for using ref and reactive. Here I'd like to share with you some patterns of writing composable functions. So what is composable functions? It's actually kind of hard to give proper definitions, but I'd like to think them as a set of reusable logic and make your code better organized and separate the concern. Here is an example. The use dark function in Vuex is provided as a simple toggle for enable and disable dark mode for apps. There are actually two variables involved. One is the system's preference and the other one is user's menu override. As you can see in this code snippet, I have used the two composable functions, use preferred dark and use storage. They will return two refs and that reflecting to their states. Detailed things like monitoring media query changes and the timing to read and write the storage adapt to them. And all I need to do is to logically compose their relationship into a single ref. So you can see here, you can see the full code or directly use it in Vuex with the links below. Okay, and the first methodology I want to share today is to think as connections. Unlike hooks in React that will run on each update, the setup function in Vue only runs once on component initializations to construct the relationships between your state and the logic. You can think the equations in mathematics where the left-hand side is always equal to right-hand side. Here is an example that we have z equal to x squared plus y squared, while x and y are independent variables, and z is a controlled variables relying on x and y. Whenever I change any of them, z will be updated accordingly, which is also similar to formulas in spreadsheets. So in composable functions, we can think arguments as an input and the returns as the output. The output should be able to reflect on input changes automatically. I will talk with you this with an example later. Another aspect is to do one thing at a time. As these are basically the same as you write any code, no need for me to spend too much time on this, but they are basically listed here. Note it's also important to have a consistent naming conventions, like prefix with use or create, and so on, to make the composable function distinguishable from other functions. Alright, let's start with our first pattern today, passing refs as arguments. Here we have a plain functions which sums up two arguments a and b. You can also see the example usage on the right. And then we can make this function accepting refs, and it returns a computed ref with their sum. Then we can pass the refs into it, as we normally would. The difference here is that the returned value is also a ref, but it will always up to date with the refs a and b. And remember the Unref function we mentioned before? We can actually make these functions more flexible by accepting both refs and plain values, and use Unref to get their values. We can also make the addition possible between a ref and a value. Here is a simple TypeScript type helper called maybe_ref that we have used a lot in Vue use. It's basically a union of type generic t and ref t. In this example, we have a function used time ago that accepts a wide range of data-like types as arguments. Normally, if you want to accept refs, you would also need to write again in refs versions. With these helpers, you can make the code shorter and more readable. A cool point is that it works great with Unrefs. It can invert correct types for maybe_ref. You can think your functions like Lego. They should have many different ways of composing them for different needs. Here we take useTitle function from Vue use as an example. Basically, when you call it, you will get a special ref that binds into the page's title. Whenever you change the ref's value, the page's title will also be updated. Similarly, when the page's title changes externally, the change will also be reflected on the ref's value. Looks good, right? But it creates a new ref whenever you call it. To make it more flexible, we can actually bind an existing ref, or even a computed. Here you can see I construct a computed with a ref. When I change the source ref, the computed gets reevaluated, and so as the page's title. You might be wondering how this could be implemented. Let's take a look at a simplified version of it. So there is actually only two statements. One is ref and the other one is watch. At the first line, we unify the refs from the user or create a new one. And on the second line, it watches the change to the ref and sync up with the page title. Maybe it's a little bit hard to catch up with what is happening here in the first line. Let me explain it a bit. Here we utilize the existing behaviors of the ref functions. Similar to Unref, ref also check whether the passed value is a ref or not. If you pass a ref to it, it will leave it as is. Since it's already a ref, there is no need to make another. This could be extremely useful in composable functions that takes maybe_ref as argument types. Let's do a quick summary so far. We can use maybe_ref in arguments to make the function flexible, and use ref functions when you want to normalize it as a ref, and use Unref functions when you want to get the value. Both of them are universals and there is no conditions needed. Another pattern today is to use object of refs. When you need to return multiple data entries in a composable function, consider return an object composed by refs. In this way, user can have full features of ES6 object destructure, and the destructure values are also refs, so the reactive still remains. And the user can also rename it or take only partial of it as they want. On the other hand, it's also flexible enough when user want to use it as a single object. Simply wrap it with a reactive function. The ref will get unwrapped as a properties automatically. That said, user can get benefits from both ref and reactive as needed. Since we are constructing connections using Composition API, we can actually make async functions to sync by building the connection first, before it resolve. Let's say we want to request some data using the fetch API. Normally, we would need to await the request being responded and the payload being passed before we can use the data. With Composition API, we can actually make the data as a ref of null, then be fulfilled later. This can make your app take time to handle other stuff while waiting for the data to be fetched. The idea is similar to SWR, but with much simpler implementations. The implementation can be simple done as this. All we have to do is to assign value to refs when the promise gets resolved. In real world, it might need some flags to show the current state of the request, where you can find the full codes in Vue use. Watched and computed in Vue will stop themselves automatically along with the component unmounting. We'd recommend to following the same pattern for your custom composable functions. By calling the unmounted hooks inside your composable functions, you can schedule the effect cleanup logic. For example, it's common to use add event listener to register the handler of DOM events. When you finish the usage, it would also need to remember to unregister it using remove event listener. In this case, we can have a function use event listener that unregister itself along with the component, so you don't need to worry about it anymore. While side effects auto cleanup is nice, sometimes you may want to have better controls over when to do that. I drafted an RFC proposing a new API called effect scope to collect those effects into a single instance, that you can stop them together at any time you want. This is likely to be implemented and shipped with Vue 3.1. Check it out for more details if it get you interested. We have a set of new API called provider and inject. It's basically for sharing some context for components chosen to consume and reuse. There are two separate functions, which means TypeScript can actually infer the type for each context automatically. But here we have a solution for that. Vue provides a type helper called injection key where you can define a symbol that carries the type you want. And it will hint provider and inject to have a proper auto-completion and type checking. For example, here I define an interface user info which contains two properties, and I expose a symbol with the injection type. In usage, I can use provider function to provide the data with key. As you can see, I got a type arrows that ID should be a number. So I can catch up the error right away before it go into the production. And in child components, we can use injection functions with the key as well. You can see it correctly infer the types for user info and its properties. With the flexibility of Vue's Composition API, sharing state is actually quite simple. You can declare some ref and reactive states in a JavaScript module and import them in your components. Since they are using the same instance, the state will be just in sync. But please note, this is actually not server-side rendering compatible. In server-side rendering, your server will create a new app on each request, where the approach will keep the state persistent across multiple rendering, and normally it's not what we would expect it. Let's see if we can make a solution for it to work with server-side rendering. By using provider and inject to share the states on the app context, which means it will create every time when the server doing the rendering. You can see here I have two functions, create my state and use my state. Create state will return a Vue plugin that provides the state to the apps, while use my state will just a wrap of injection that's using the same key. In usage, we can create the state in the main entries and pass it to app.use. And you can use the hooks to use my states everywhere in your components. If you ever tried Vue router v4, it's actually using the similar method to do that, like create router and use router. One last tip I like to share is a utility called use vModel. It's actually a simple wrap to component models to bind with pops and emit, but it's actually a lifesaver to me. We can take a look at the code. You can see we use a writable computed. When accessing the value, we forward the value of pops to it, and when writing, we emit out the update event automatically, so you can use it as a normal ref. Even more, we can actually bind into the children's elements vModels very easily. That's all the tips and the pattern I have for today. As you might think those are for Vue 3 only, but actually they also apply to Vue 2. In case you don't know that, if you're still on Vue 2 but want to get started with the Composition API, here we offer an official plugin that enables Composition API for your Vue 2 apps. Give it a try if you haven't. We also announced our plans for Vue 2.7 recently. Vue 2.7 will be the last Miro version of Vue 2 with long-time support for existing projects and those who need IE11 support. We will backport Vue 3's new features to Vue 2.7 and migrate the Vue Composition API plugin to it. Stay tuned on that. If you are library authors that want your library to support Vue 2 and 3 at the same code base, you can try Vueday, which is out the difference between Vue 2 and 3, and by auto-detecting users' environment. And that's all for today. Here is a quick recap. Due to the time limitations, it's a shame that I cannot share all I have learned with you. As Vue Composition API is still fairly new, I believe there are more patterns and better practice for us to find. To get more information, do check out the Vueuse org on GitHub and its awesome ecosystem. And follow us on Twitter at Vueuse to keep up to date with the news and the tips. Slides of this talk can be found on my site antfu.me. Thank you for listening. Let's see in the QA section. Bye.
Wow, dude. You said it would be a little intense and code heavy. You gave that, man. You delivered. Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah,
How
I
was
hope
it for you
enjoying
watching?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So how was the talk for you looking back at it as your first proper talk at a conference?
Yeah, I kind of want to do better, I guess. Since it's a recording, I actually do it a lot of time. So yeah, I definitely, yeah, I got it, the feeling like you can do better, like you cannot be perfect. Yeah, but I'm kind of good with the result, and I hope you enjoying my talk.
I certainly did. And you just gave us a live lesson because everything can always be better. But if you check the chat, people loved it. So put that in your pocket for your next talk. And so if we look at the chat, a lot of people are actually asking about your slides and how you built those. And now that we have a little bit of time for this Q&A, let's just dive in. And can you explain how you did that?
All right. So like, this is actually my third time to preparing for talks. So like every time I'm preparing like to do the slides, I feel like it's a pain, like either using like Keynote or PowerPoint or like Google Slides. There's a pain that's for me like I need to insert with some code snippets, like with the highlighting. So you can do that with some like highlighting formats to image some image with different colors. But that one could be like you cannot adjust them, like otherwise you need to generate the images again. So
exactly.
Yeah. So during preparing this talk, I come up with like maybe I can do that way with the tools that I already familiar with, and with Vue, and like also with the composition API itself that I have learned a lot and using the Vue use to make this. So then yeah, it's kind of like I take half time to make the slides and it take a half time to make the tool. So some kind of that, like that.
So you kind of make it your own little project to do this. And yeah, I think it's great, man. That's awesome. I see we have a question in the Q&A, so I'm just going to read it for us. Anthony,
Okay.
how do you do for building so much project around the Vue ecosystem? So I'm assuming like how can you get so much work done in so little time?
Okay, so for me, like I guess I'm kind of like a young shaving guy. So like similar to like the slide things, whenever I like seeing some problems, I just want to do it or like improve it, some kind of thing. So like for me, like during working on other projects, I come up with some new ideas and then I make a new project. So to make like actually I didn't kind of think I make a lot of stuff, but I kind of think like for me the methodology is like I would rather focus on one thing at a time and make it good and then move on and to do another thing, and then maybe when you get some time you can look back to it.
Yeah, exactly. We tend to call that you're scratching your own itch. When you see something that you want to fix, you just build a tool for it and you move on. And
Yeah.
apparently you do that really well. I'm going to have to look into all that and make sure that people look at your sponsors page, right? So you can keep doing that. Okay, so I have some questions of my own, and let's see what you think about those. Because right now I work at a startup and I'm doing this kind of community stuff. But before, I used to work at agencies, right? So we did huge projects for, let's say, for one client, we would build 100 websites, all with Vue.js, right? But if you do that, you need people from China to Brazil to Paris. Like we have huge teams with different skill sets, different cultures, things like that. So we chose Vue 2 back in the day because it was so easy to learn, right? It's kind of like if you understand the template approach of the options API,
Yeah.
it's kind of easy to bind stuff and everything is magically reactive, right? As you do in the options API. But now, of course, we have composition API, we have Vue 3, we have TypeScript, all of that. And so I'm asking you this, like, which one is easier to learn with keeping in mind that for a project like what I worked on, we have people from all different skill sets.
All right. So I guess we still recommend to use Vue to use the options API as the beginning to get a more interactive APIs and like get things work and more like that. And composition API is more like advanced topic or like advanced features for like users to reuse their codes to make the adjusting their logic to make to organize their project. So for me, like I kind of think like for beginners, like you can go with like options APIs, and then whenever you like feel like maybe you can need to get something more advanced, like or like you think your code is too long or too complex, you need to do some refactor. Maybe you can take a look at the Vue composition API. But like I kind of think like if you are already kind of like an expert in JavaScript, or like you know exactly what the limitations of the JavaScript or something, you can just go with the composition API. So for me, that I'm using composition API myself for a few months, and then I kind of think, to me, like I actually cannot without it. So I kind of think with the script setup with the script setup sugar, you can actually make the code more cleaner, which is kind of definitely a boost to me. So yeah, so maybe try both, yeah, to see what fits you better. Right?
That's awesome, because that's exactly what we did. Because basically the options API still works, right? And what I do like about the composition API is that you have to choose what is reactive rather than that everything is just that. Because we've seen a lot in the options API that people put so much stuff in the data object, but they don't realize that it attaches a whole bunch of process to it, right? So there is a question in the Q&A from Sibren that I'll go there in a sec. Before, I wanted to ask, like, based on what you showed, right, with the use and the on functions and things like that, keeping the state, do we still need Vuex?
Yeah, I kind of think there is several article talking about like maybe you don't need Vuex in Vue 3 or like with composition API. So I guess it's true. Like the composition API could already cover some usage from Vuex, but I kind of think Vuex still exists and still will remaining. Because of that, it's kind of like an official opinion for you to manage the states, and it has the first class integration with like div tools and like server-side rendering. Think like if you do just like I mentioned before, like if you want to store some states globally to share components, you can simply use a ref or a reactive object inside of JS module, but it actually kind of breaks the server-side rendering since some reason, right? So like Vuex can handle that automatically for you. So it's kind of like an out-of-box solution. And there is also an RFC, the version 5 of Vuex, which is significant improvements with the composition API and with the TypeScript support. So like if you're interested in that, you can definitely check it out.
Oh, that's very interesting, because to me, maybe I'm a bit more old school. For me, keeping the state more globally for all my components to just use getters or something like that, right? If you have a big app, I kind of like that it's all namespaced and close together in the Vuex store. Because now thinking on doing a global ref somewhere, I feel like I don't have control over that. It can, if you have a big team, it will just grow like wildfire everywhere. Right. So I'm really interested how that is going to connect later on. So, of course, doing TypeScript with the options API worked, but it was a little tricky. So how is that now with the composition API in Vue 3?
Yeah, like, to be honest, to me, like, I kind of think the composition API in Vue 3 with the TypeScript support is almost native as TypeScript, as the TypeScript itself on VS Code with the Vola extension. So like you can get the renaming functions working, and also it will remain the usage in the templates, and also type check with the templates. So yeah, I kind of think you definitely need to give a try with the script setup with the script setup syntax and with the composition API. It kind of, yeah, to me it's really good. And I built this the slides app using with it. I'm really satisfied with it.
Okay, I'm going to have to try. So are you doing types or interfaces? What's your style?
Yeah. Like for most of the time, I use interface. And I use types whenever I need to do some hacks.
There you go. Because I love how the opinions different on that. Because I've just done some React projects where nobody's like, no interfaces. I'm like, okay, up to you. Now that we did mention the word React, I know we're in a Vue conference, right? But I cannot help but think about the React hooks, right? With the use state and things like that. How do you think the composition API compares to all the stuff that's happening in React lately?
All right, so I can think the Vue composition API definitely got some inspirations from the Vue hooks, from the React hooks.
Vue hooks,
But
ooh. No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah. Okay, and I can think, but the actually the methodology is different. Things like in React, you trigger the render function, and you the hooks were called every time you render, right? But in Vue, like the slab function is only runs once for each component. Yeah. So I kind of think that could be like more intuitive, with lower, like, I don't know, man barrier or something. So you can just think like, I don't know, Excel, like spell sheets. Whenever you connect the relations between each data, and it will just work. Some kind of like that.
Yeah, I must say, with React, I've seen it go wrong quite a lot because it reevaluates every time everything. So if you add like CSS and JS kind of stuff that you see sometimes in React, and if you don't do that well, and you change one property or somewhere, everything re-renders, and we've seen like memory leaks go on quite a bit. I've not really seen that in Vue, but of course, my opinions are my own, right? I'm not telling the truth here, but it's interesting to see that difference. And I'm still a Vue user. I really enjoy it. So let's go to the Q&A because Sibran, like he actually asked, so do you have any tips for contributing to open source projects?
Okay, all right. So I guess we can start simple. So like, don't afraid to like make a pull request to fix some typos. It's just yeah. So it can help you get a better familiar with the like GitHub working flow or open source workflow, and then you can start to contributing more. And like I kind of think open source is also a good way to learn. Like you can make pull requests, and the people will help you to review your code and give you such suggestions. And then that's a way. I kind of think it's a very good way to learn, to find what could it be improved in your code. And to me, like I also like encourage people to send pull requests. Like maybe sometimes you already found the issue, or maybe you already got some like solutions, but you can actually make it a pull request and mark it as a contribution to this project.
I must be honest, it was a bit daunting to me also. And then at one point, this is a while back, I just did a pull request to Vue.js because there was something not like my test runner gave me a lot of errors on using the fig caption tag in Jest. I was like, I hate these errors because my CI logs are too full. So I just made a quick pull request to Vue.js to so it understands that tag. And I think it was merged like in a day. And I was like, really? These guys are awesome because, well, if you follow the guidelines of what they tell you to do and you give something valuable, so Sibrin, this is for you, it's actually nice.
Yeah, right.
Our community is awesome. It is simple and baby steps, right? You don't have to do a pull request to the core of Vue.js like I did so boldly. I just was annoyed and I fixed it. But other things like going into the documentation and making that better might be almost more valuable than changing a core functionality, right? Because
Yeah, that's
that's
true.
because if you want to change something in a core of something, there's so much discussion needed. Because there's so, well,
Yeah.
as you see, there's so many opinions. It's ridiculous, right? So small steps, I guess.
Yeah.
And one thing is very important. If there are some sort of rules to how you do a fork, how you do Git flow, how you do pull requests, things like that, follow them. Because if not, you just annoy people.
Yeah.
I would say that helps. Let's see, there's something in the chat here. Okay, we're all good. So, Anthony, thank you for answering all our prickly questions. Before I introduce our break, is there anything you want to share with the audience? Because you have like 103 people watching you right now.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I made the I don't know, the slide V app for my slides, and I really want to like share with you and like get people like if you want to do it in a way like more pro developer way to make slides, and I can't wait to share with you. So actually I will send a link to that, but for now it's kind of closed beta for my sponsors, but it will release soon. So yeah, maybe stay tuned on that. So if you enjoying, if you get interested how I made that, or like how I use Vue composition APIs in it, yeah, maybe you can take a look when it's open source. Yeah, thank you guys.
Actually, we just got a really good question, and we have like 3 minutes. So I'm just gonna take it. This is all for the audience, right? So this is from Nicola. So the composition API pattern helps in functions and unit testing. So do you have any tips for unit testing specifically with composition API?
Oh, yeah, like since composition API is actually decoupled from the Vue components model, so like you can actually test them without Vue or without mounting. Like you can just think as the refs as a normal object, or like you can just test with the value or like with the changes. And then if you really need to like test Vue 2 and 3 in the Vue composition APIs, and the Vueday also provided some tools like to help you to swap the Vue versions between underneath when you're testing the composition APIs, so you can make sure like your utilities works for both Vue 2 and 3. So yeah, for that you can check out the README of the project.
So do we have the Vue test utils already working with composition API?
Yeah, sure. Like
Well, if that's
I
the
can.
case, we're good to go, right? Sorry, go on.
Yeah. This is the last time I checked, I can think the stable is almost ready. It's in the
Okay.
RC stage. Yeah.
Yeah, because in the end, you should make, this is maybe a tip from Uncle Tim, but make your unit tests simple, right? And if you have composition API, you can extract all your functions and abstract them really nicely into small chunks. Just test one function in and out. And if you want to combine all your tests into one of a bigger thing, you should be using something like Cypress potentially, right? So have a look at Jessica Sachs's talk later on today on how that works, because people always tend to forget that you have integration tests and unit tests. So keep your unit tests simple, and it should actually be easier with composition API.
Yeah, right.
Anyways, I'm rambling and it's not my time to talk. So thank you, Anthony. This was great. And so we're going to have a little coffee break now, because in Europe, where this is streaming, it is now 11:15. So we have half an hour break. And so when you go into your break, of course, have your coffee or tea or whatever you like. And make sure you go to the expo, because Accenture is live streaming and they're talking about Vue.js and micro front-end architectures, like how do you combine those and how that works. And there's also the hallway track in the sessions where you can just share a camera and talk to people, right? So feel free to explore and potentially check my booth also in the expo, but that's for later. Anyways, thank you everyone and have a nice break. We will see you back in half an hour, which is 11:15 CEST time. That's it. Cheers.